Picture this. March 25th, 2024. CNN releases surveillance footage from the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles, showing Sean "Diddy" Combs violently attacking his then-girlfriend Cassie Ventura. The timestamp reads March 5th, 2016, meaning this evidence existed for 8 years, while Diddy built his defense around complete denial. He knew this footage existed. He knew what it showed, yet he believed his billion-dollar empire made him untouchable. Tonight, we're diving deep into the twisted psychology of a man who built an empire on talent, but sustained it through terror. November 4th, 1969. Harlem, New York. 2-year-old Sean Combs witnesses something that will shape every decision he makes for the rest of his life. His father Melvin is executed, shot dead while sitting in his car on Central Park West. This isn't random violence. Melvin was connected to drug operations, and someone wanted him silenced permanently. Little Sean absorbs a lesson that poisons his developing mind. Violence is how power works, and only the powerful survive. But the trauma runs deeper than anyone realizes. His mother, Janice, desperate to provide, begins hosting parties that neighbors describe as wild gatherings where adult behaviors unfold in front of young Sean's eyes. His childhood friend, Patterson, later reveals the disturbing truth in documentary footage. These weren't normal social events. They involved behaviors that no child should witness, planting twisted seeds about power, control, and manipulation in Sean's developing psyche. At night, Sean lies in the Bronx projects with roaches crawling across his face. The poverty burns into his soul, but it doesn't create empathy. Instead, it forges something far more dangerous: an insatiable hunger for control. He learns that being powerless means being prey, and he vows never to be prey again. This childhood doesn't create a survivor. It creates a predator who understands vulnerability intimately and knows exactly how to exploit it. The transformation begins in the 1990s as Sean becomes Puff Daddy, building Bad Boy Records into a hip-hop empire. But success isn't enough for someone whose childhood taught him that chaos is always lurking. He begins to understand that wealth and influence create a special kind of invisibility, the kind that lets powerful men do whatever they want as long as they maintain the right public image. The music industry becomes his perfect hunting ground. Hip-hop culture celebrates excess, dominance, and control. When Diddy talks about power, violence, or treating people like objects, it's dismissed as artistic expression. The culture that made him rich also provides perfect camouflage for his darker impulses. He realizes that as long as he keeps making money for the right people, certain behaviors will be overlooked, rationalized, or simply ignored. This is where Diddy's psychology becomes truly sinister. He develops what psychologists call dark triad traits: narcissism, manipulation, and a complete lack of empathy. Childhood trauma taught him that the world is fundamentally violent and unpredictable. Wealth showed him that money can rewrite reality. But it's his position as a cultural icon that creates his sense of untouchability. He's not just rich, he's beloved. This dual status creates a psychological fortress where consequences seem impossible. The first real test of his invincibility comes through his relationship with Cassie Ventura. They begin dating in 2007 when she's just 19 years old and he's 37, a successful R&B singer desperate for career advancement under his Bad Boy Records label. On November 16th, 2023, Cassie files a federal lawsuit in the Southern District of New York, alleging a decade-long pattern of abuse that reads like a psychological horror story. The 35-page complaint details systematic control that goes far beyond typical relationship abuse. What happens next reveals the true depth of Diddy's psychological manipulation. According to later court documents, he doesn't just date Cassie. He systematically destroys her sense of self. He controls her career, her friendships, her daily activities. He uses a technique that cults have perfected for decades, alternate between extreme affection and sudden rejection, creating psychological dependency stronger than any drug. But Diddy's control goes far beyond typical relationship abuse. Cassie's lawsuit alleges he begins orchestrating events he calls freak-offs, elaborate scenarios involving drugs and coercion that could last for days. The complaint describes how Diddy would hire male workers and force Cassie to participate while he filmed everything. These weren't spontaneous moments. They were carefully planned psychological experiments in total domination. Court documents reveal he kept rooms stocked with drugs, baby oil, and recording equipment specifically for these events. The psychology behind these alleged events reveals something chilling about Diddy's mindset. He doesn't see other people as fully human. They're objects to be positioned and manipulated for his entertainment. This level of dehumanization typically develops over years of unchecked power, where normal social boundaries gradually dissolve until nothing seems off limits. Meanwhile, Diddy's public persona grows stronger. He's not just a music mogul anymore. He's a cultural icon, a business genius, a philanthropist. This carefully crafted image becomes his most powerful weapon because it makes the truth seem impossible. When whispers about his private behavior surface, people can't reconcile them with the successful entrepreneur they see on television. The cognitive dissonance works in his favor, making victims seem less credible and allegations seem less believable. His wealth creates practical invincibility too. When Cassie's lawsuit threatens his empire, something unprecedented happens. Within 24 hours of filing, the case is settled for an undisclosed amount. 24 hours. Most lawsuits of this magnitude take years to resolve, but Diddy's legal team moves with lightning speed to make the problem disappear. His attorney's statement is carefully crafted. Mr. Combs' decision to settle the lawsuit does not in any way undermine his flat-out denial of the claims. The settlement comes with ironclad NDAs designed to silence Cassie permanently. The music industry's culture of silence enables everything. Hip-hop has always celebrated controversial figures, and Diddy's occasional public outbursts or aggressive behavior are dismissed as part of his artistic persona. When he talks about violence or control in interviews, it's seen as hyperbole rather than confession. The industry that profits from his success has every incentive to ignore uncomfortable truths about his private behavior. But perhaps most importantly, Diddy benefits from something deeper: society's reluctance to believe that beloved figures can be monsters. The same psychological mechanism that protected figures like Bill Cosby for decades works in Diddy's favor. People invest so much in their image of him as a successful black entrepreneur that acknowledging his alleged crimes would require admitting they were fooled by a carefully constructed lie. This protection extends to law enforcement too. Diddy's connections to politicians, celebrities, and business leaders create a web of influence that makes investigation difficult. When you're friends with mayors, governors, and entertainment executives, complaints about your behavior tend to get buried rather than investigated. His charitable work and public appearances create additional layers of protection, making him seem like an unlikely candidate for serious criminal behavior. The psychological profile that emerges is terrifying in its calculated nature. Diddy doesn't commit crimes of passion. He orchestrates systematic campaigns of control and manipulation. Every action is designed to reinforce his power while maintaining plausible deniability. He's learned to weaponize his trauma, his success, and society's blind spots to create a perfect storm of invincibility. His alleged victims are chosen strategically: young women in the entertainment industry who need his approval for career advancement, people whose complaints can be dismissed as motivated by money or fame, individuals who lack the resources to fight back effectively. He's learned that the most vulnerable people make the safest targets because society is already predisposed to doubt their stories. The control extends beyond individual victims to entire social circles. Court documents suggest Diddy created an environment where witnessing his behavior became normalized, where staff and associates were gradually conditioned to accept increasingly disturbing actions. This isn't accidental. It's a deliberate strategy to create complicity and silence through gradual exposure to wrongdoing. But Diddy's greatest psychological weapon is his ability to make his version of reality seem more credible than the truth. He doesn't just deny allegations. He creates alternative narratives that paint accusers as opportunists and himself as a victim of false accusations. This isn't simple lying. It's sophisticated gaslighting on a massive scale, designed to make observers question their own judgment about what's real. But the surveillance footage changes everything. On March 25, 2024, CNN obtains and releases hotel security footage from March 5, 2016, showing Diddy in a hotel hallway wearing only a towel, grabbing Cassie, throwing her to the ground, kicking her, and dragging her back toward his room. The footage is grainy but unmistakable. It shows exactly what Cassie described in her lawsuit. For 8 years, Diddy knew this evidence existed, yet continued building his defense around complete denial. His response reveals the depth of his psychological manipulation. On May 19, 2024, Diddy posts an apology video on Instagram that mental health experts immediately recognize as textbook narcissistic damage control. "I was disgusted when I did it," he says, but focuses entirely on his own feelings. "I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses." The video is analyzed frame by body language experts who note his lack of genuine remorse, his self-focused language, and his attempt to control the narrative even while apologizing. The raids that precede his arrest reveal the physical evidence of his psychological control. On March 25, 2024, federal agents simultaneously raid his homes in Los Angeles and Miami, seizing over 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant, 3 AR-15 rifles, large amounts of ammunition, and drugs including ketamine, ecstasy, and GHB. Most chilling are the seized hard drives containing videos of the alleged freak-offs, showing that Diddy documented his own crimes, believing the evidence would never be used against him. The federal charges that follow represent the complete collapse of his perceived invincibility. On September 16, 2024, federal agents arrest Diddy at the Park Hyatt Hotel in Manhattan. The indictment is devastating: racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. If convicted on all charges, he faces a minimum of 15 years and a maximum of life in prison. But the psychological blow comes from the details. Federal prosecutors describe a criminal enterprise operating under his leadership since 2008. What emerges from the wreckage is a psychological portrait of someone who never learned healthy boundaries because trauma taught him that boundaries don't exist for the powerless. The avalanche of lawsuits that follows tells the real story. 63 civil suits and counting, with accusers ranging in age from 13 to 38 at the time of alleged incidents. Attorney Tony Busby announces he represents 120 additional accusers, stating that half are men and include 25 minors. The scope is staggering. Allegations spanning from 1990 to 2024, suggesting decades of systematic abuse enabled by wealth and cultural protection. The question isn't why Diddy thought he'd never be caught. It's why it took so long for anyone to catch him. His psychological manipulation was so sophisticated, his cultural protection so complete, and his financial resources so vast that consequences seemed genuinely impossible. He created a perfect storm of invincibility that lasted for decades. But the surveillance footage proves a fundamental truth about human psychology. Reality always exists, regardless of how many people are convinced to ignore it. Diddy's greatest mistake wasn't underestimating the law. It was overestimating his ability to control the truth indefinitely. The mind that made him untouchable for so long finally became the weapon that destroyed him. Today, as he sits in the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn awaiting trial, denied bail 3 times due to being deemed a flight risk and danger to the community, we see the complete collapse of a psychological fortress built on trauma, wealth, and calculated manipulation. His legal team's desperation shows in their failed attempts to secure his release, offering a $50 million bail package, home detention with GPS monitoring, and surrendering his passport. Federal Judge Andrew Carter denied each request, stating that no condition or combination of conditions could ensure community safety.